Hello everyone and welcome to my channel Y&R Trends. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. In the winding, emotionally tangled world of the young and the restless, few storylines have ever carried the weight, danger, and generational history that erupts when Jack Abbott and Victor Newman, eternal rivals, corporate assassins in Armani suits, and two titans of Genoa City, find themselves pushed to a breaking point so severe that reconciliation becomes not a peaceful choice, but a ruthless necessity, forged in the fire of a threat that neither man can defeat alone. A threat embodied in the resurrected and unhinged Matt Clark, whose vendetta burns hotter than ever and whose obsession with destroying both the Newman and Abbott dynasties spirals into a level of calculated terror that even the great Victor Newman cannot anticipate. For weeks, Genoa City buzzes with whispers that something darker than corporate espionage, family feuds, or boardroom backstabbing is on the horizon, something that forces Victor to temporarily abandon his pride, and Jack to silence decades of hatred, long enough to confront the monstrous storm approaching them, because Matt, unchecked, unpredictable, and now hiding behind a new alias, a new network of mercenaries, and a sadistic genius sharpened by years living in the shadows, has developed a three-tiered plan designed to dismantle both men psychologically, financially, and emotionally before delivering the final blow. And as this sinister plot begins threading icy fingers through the lives of their loved ones, the old power players realize that the only way to neutralize Matt is not through the law, not through corporate power, and not through one of Victor's secret security teams, but through something unthinkable for two men whose hatred is practically coded into their DNA. A truce, fragile but necessary, a handshake made with clenched jaws and narrowed eyes, a pact to defend their families even if it means tearing open old wounds, and stepping into moral territory that both men have spent lifetimes pretending they don't inhabit. The catalyst comes the moment Victor receives a chilling message from Matt containing photos of Nikki, Victoria, Kyle, Summer, and even Harrison, each photo marked with a countdown number, each number lower than the last, and the subtext unmistakable: Matt is watching, Matt is close, Matt is preparing to strike. And when Jack receives an identical package in the mail, complete with the same ominous message scrawled in Matt's jagged handwriting, the pieces slide into place and both alpha males know with icy clarity that whatever their feud has cost them over the years, whatever boardroom humiliation they inflicted on one another, none of it compares to the cost of inaction now, though their initial meeting is hostile, with Jack accusing Victor of creating this monster years ago and Victor countering that Jack's softness and indecisiveness have made their families perpetual targets. The truth begins to bleed through their stubbornness. Matt has returned not for revenge alone, but to force Victor and Jack into a psychological crucible where their families' fates depend on whether these two titans can set aside everything that made them enemies and become allies, even partners. And so begins the darkest alliance in Y&R history. A clandestine partnership forged behind the locked doors of the Newman Ranch study, where Victor outlines Matt's psychological profile, his patterns, his obsessions, his failures, and Jack contributes the one thing Victor lacks: understanding of the emotional stakes, the insight into how deeply Matt can twist guilt, fear, and desperation into weapons. Victor's plan is cold and strategic, Jack's is personal and human, but the blend of both becomes their advantage as they uncover Matt's three reasons. First, Matt blames Victor for destroying his life decades earlier, a grudge Victor dismisses publicly but privately acknowledges as the result of choices he once made without considering their collateral damage. Second, Matt craves vengeance against Jack for refusing to help him in his hour of desperation long ago when Matt begged the Abbotts for protection, a plea Jack never knew existed because Matt's message never reached him, a truth that now haunts Jack. And third, perhaps the most dangerous reason, Matt sees himself as the rightful heir to Genoa City's power vacuum, believing that destroying both Victor and Jack will free the city from what he calls the twin tyrants, making him the new mastermind pulling every string, a delusion that grows stronger and more violent with each passing day. As the threat escalates, the two men agree to stage a trap, a psychological web designed to draw Matt out of hiding, and though their methods differ drastically, Victor leans on deception, misinformation, and surveillance while Jack relies on humanity, empathy, and insight into Matt's fractured psyche. The combined strategy begins cornering Matt into making a mistake, something he has avoided for years, until one snowy night when Nikki is lured into an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Genoa City by a forged text message she believes is from Victoria and Jack and Victor, already suspecting Matt's tactic of isolating his targets, follow Nikki's GPS signal to the warehouse, arriving just moments before Matt emerges from the shadows holding a gun, his expression wild and triumphant as he proclaims that the hour of reckoning has come. The confrontation unfolds with the emotional intensity only YNR can deliver, Victor demanding that Matt face him man-to-man, Jack pleading with him to choose a different path, and Nikki, voice trembling, admitting she still believes there is a sliver of humanity left in him, but Matt's grin reveals the truth. He never intended to negotiate, never intended to accept redemption, because the only ending he envisions is one where Victor and Jack fall, broken and humiliated at his feet. When he raises the gun toward Nikki, Victor lunges forward with the instinct of a father, a protector, a man who will burn the world before losing the people he loves, and Jack, driven by the raw memory of every loss. The Abbotts have endured, tackles Matt from the side, sending all three men crashing into metal crates and broken machinery, and the warehouse fills with the roar of struggling bodies, shouts, and the screech of steel. In the chaos, Matt reaches for the gun again, his face twisted with hatred, and for the first time in their long rivalry, Jack and Victor react in perfect sync. Victor stepping between Matt and Nikki, Jack swinging a rusted pipe just hard enough to knock the weapon from Matt's grasp, and together they overpower him, pinning him against the cold concrete floor, breathless, furious, and united by sheer necessity. And though they intend only to restrain him, the old building proves their undoing. Matt, refusing to be taken alive, lunges backward into a support beam already weakened by time and winter frost, and the beam collapses, triggering a chain reaction that causes the upper platform to give way, sending a massive steel sheet plummeting downward. Jack shouts for Victor to move, Victor yells for Jack to get Nikki out, and in the split second of motion and instinct, Matt leaps toward them one final time, only to be crushed beneath the falling platform, silencing his threat forever in a twist of fate that neither Victor nor Jack could have engineered even in their darkest minds. The silence after the collapse stretches endlessly as dust rains down around them, and the reality of what just happened sinks into their bones. Not a murder, not a planned execution, but a tragic, violent end brought upon by Matt's own refusal to surrender. And when Jack meets Victor's eyes through the dim haze of debris, something ancient and heavy shifts between them, something older than their feud, deeper than their grudges, a recognition that they together saved their families, that their combined strengths prevented a catastrophe neither could have stopped alone, and though neither man says the words aloud, the meaning is undeniable, echoing through the ruined warehouse and into the future of Genoa City, that on this night Jack Abbott and Victor Newman reconciled, not because they wanted peace, but because they needed each other to survive. In the days that follow, the public story becomes the sanitized version, that Matt Clark died while attempting to harm the Newmans and Abbotts, that Jack and Victor acted bravely to protect their loved ones, and although both men know the truth carries darker shades, they share an unspoken vow to keep that night locked away, understanding that some alliances form only once in a lifetime and some enemies can only be defeated by joining forces. And as Genoa City begins to breathe again, recovering from the terror Matt unleashed, Jack and Victor stand on the edge of a rare new era. Not friends, not exactly allies, but something far more complex and far more powerful. Two patriarchs bound by survival, bound by the memory of the night they faced death together, and bound by the knowledge that should any new threat arise against their families, the world may once again witness the unimaginable. Jack Abbott and Victor Newman united. In the weeks following Matt Clark's harrowing demise beneath the collapsing steel platform, a strange, uneasy calm settles over Genoa City, one that feels less like peace and more like the slow exhale after barely outrunning disaster. And though the town goes about its routines with the same blend of scandal, romance, and corporate chaos it always has, there is an unmistakable shift in the energy surrounding the Newman and Abbott families, as if both clans instinctively sense that something foundational has changed, something that cannot be undone or ignored, something rooted in the unlikely alliance forged between Victor Newman and Jack Abbott, two men who have spent lifetimes building walls against each other, only to watch those walls crack open when confronted with a danger neither could defeat alone. Yet despite the public narrative being neatly wrapped and broadcasted as an act of mutual heroism, behind closed doors both men begin to grapple, quietly, privately, and in the sleepless hours of early morning, with the emotional wreckage left in Matt's wake, because the psychological scars he inflicted did not disappear with his death, and the reminders linger in subtle ways. Nikki waking up gasping for breath after reliving the warehouse night in her dreams, Kyle obsessively checking the locks on the Abbott mansion every evening, Victoria staring out her office window for minutes at a time as if expecting Matt's ghost to emerge from the shadows, and Jack himself, pausing mid-sentence whenever someone unexpectedly enters a room, his instincts conditioned to anticipate danger even when none exists. Yet the strangest transformation happens in Victor, the indomitable patriarch who has always projected invulnerability, who has survived more betrayals than most people can count, who has faced enemies far more ruthless than Matt Clark. But something about this particular ordeal cuts deeper, forces him to confront the reality that even he, the Titan of Newman Enterprises, cannot protect his family from every threat, and the weight of that truth flickers across his features when he thinks no one is watching. For the first time in decades, the great Victor Newman begins reflecting on the choices that created monsters like Matt, the lives trampled in the name of victory, the rivals destroyed without hesitation, and he wonders, quietly, privately, whether the seeds of this most recent nightmare were planted long ago in the fertile soil of his own ambition. And though he would never speak such thoughts aloud, they linger in his mind like a storm cloud that refuses to dissipate. Meanwhile, Jack, who always prided himself on seeing the world through human eyes rather than corporate ones, finds himself wrestling with guilt he never expected to carry, guilt rooted in the revelation that Matt once reached out to the Abbotts for help Jack never knew he needed. And the thought that things could have been different gnaws at him in quiet moments, especially when he watches his son, Kyle, hovering protectively around Summer and Harrison as if expecting Matt's shadow to return, reminding Jack that every unaddressed wound eventually bleeds into the next generation. Yet despite the trauma, something powerful and unexpectedly stabilizing forms between Jack and Victor in the aftermath of the warehouse incident. Not friendship, not trust, but a kind of mutually understood responsibility. A recognition that their families are no longer just parallel worlds colliding by coincidence but intertwined destinies shaped by shared loss, shared fear, and shared survival. This realization becomes unmistakable on the morning Victor unexpectedly visits the Abbott mansion, walking past the threshold with a calm Jack hasn't seen on him since long before Matt resurfaced. And while the sight of Victor Newman casually entering the Abbott home would normally elicit sarcastic comments or wary glares, even the staff senses that today is different, that the rules have shifted, and the two patriarchs retreat into the study where Jack pours them both a drink, a sign not of camaraderie, but of acknowledgement, a recognition that what they survived together merits a moment of truce. Victor speaks first, his voice lower than usual, less steel-coated, as he admits that the warehouse night did not just threaten their families but exposed vulnerabilities he thought he buried decades ago. And Jack, surprised by the candor, responds with a rare confession of his own, that he too has been haunted, replaying the scene over and over, not because he regrets saving Nikki or helping Victor, but because Matt's downfall feels like a mirror reflecting every mistake both men ever allowed to fester until it grew into something monstrous. As the conversation deepens and unspoken truth emerges between them, their feud nearly cost them everything, and the years wasted on rivalry have left their families exposed to dangers far more insidious than corporate takeover bids or romantic entanglements. For a fleeting moment, both men appear almost human, stripped of ego, stripped of pretense, bonded by shared trauma, and though neither would admit it aloud, both understand that this fragile reconciliation is not a fluke but the beginning of a new era, one governed not by grudges but by the necessity of unity. Yet even as peace forms on the surface, the forces beneath Genoa City begin stirring, because the vacuum left by Matt's death creates tremors that ripple through the criminal underworld, drawing out old enemies, opportunists, and shadowy figures who once feared Matt's unpredictability, and now see his absence as an opening to reclaim power, and whispers begin circulating about a mysterious faction echoing from dark corners of the city, an organization Matt may have been connected to, one far larger and more dangerous than anyone realized, one that does not take kindly to loose ends as explosive as the death of their unhinged associate. At the same time, the media begins digging deeper into the details of Matt's demise, refusing to accept the official Gotham-like narrative without question, and tabloids push headlines suggesting inconsistencies in the police report, implying that perhaps Matt's death was not simply the result of an unstable structure but part of something more orchestrated, more deliberate. And while Victor could easily quash such rumors, he chooses not to, because doing so would draw more attention, more probing eyes, more questions neither he nor Jack is willing to answer. As the weeks stretch into months, the uneasy alliance between Jack and Victor strengthens in subtle ways. Jack calling Victor privately to warn him of a suspicious investment group sniffing around Jabot. Victor alerting Jack when he notices unfamiliar vehicles staking out the Abbott estate. And even Nikki and Diane, two women rarely aligned, begin softening toward each other in cautious, tentative gestures rooted in shared fear and relief. But the truth, the one no one dares speak aloud, is that despite Matt's death, the danger he unleashed may not have died with him, because among the rubble recovered from the warehouse, a small, encrypted flash drive is discovered by Chancellor during a secondary sweep, a device containing coded messages, offshore banking routes, and a digital ledger referencing a mysterious initiative called Project Helix, a word that appears dozens of times throughout the files, each instance linked to cryptic references, and one name appears repeatedly, chilling in its implication, Clark, Asset 17. Chance delivers the flash drive to Victor, recognizing that Newman's resources can decrypt what the police cannot, and though Victor initially intends to keep the discovery private, Jack catches wind of it when he notices Victor cancel a series of important meetings without explanation, prompting him to confront his old rival-turned-reluctant ally in the ranch study late one evening, demanding to know what new threat is looming over their families. Victor, after a long silence, reveals the flash drive, explaining that whatever Matt was involved in extends far beyond personal revenge, far beyond Genoa City itself, and the decision to show Jack the decrypted files marks a monumental shift in their dynamic, because Victor Newman reveals secrets to no one, let alone Jack Abbott. Together, Jack and Victor begin piecing through the data, discovering references to covert shipments, private auctions, bribed officials, and a cryptic link to a global syndicate operating beneath the surface of legitimate enterprises, hinting that Matt Clark, a man once dismissed as a deranged lone wolf, was merely a pawn in a far larger game, one that may now view his death as an act worthy of retaliation. The shock washes over both men as they realize that Matt's 3 reasons were not just personal vendettas, but components of a larger directive designed to destabilize Newman Enterprises and Jabot, weaken the Newman-Abbott influence, and clear the way for this hidden network to infiltrate Genoa City through financial sabotage, blackmail pipelines, and engineered chaos. The weight of this revelation settles heavily between Jack and Victor, reaffirming the terrifying truth that their reconciliation was not just a temporary necessity but a critical reality that must endure if they hope to protect their families from a storm far larger and more coordinated than Matt Clark's fractured mind could ever produce. The following days see the two families pulled deeper into the mystery as Victor deploys his elite security teams to track down any remnants of Project Helix. Jack consults with Ashley, Billy, and Tracy on potential corporate vulnerabilities, and Nikki, despite her trauma, steps back into her role as the emotional anchor of the Newman clan, offering Victor the grounding he needs while privately wrestling with the guilt of nearly becoming Matt's final trophy. But as the investigation unfolds, new players begin entering the scene. An enigmatic broker known only as Orion, a former Helix operative who approaches Jack with a chilling message. Matt Clark was only the beginning, and his death has triggered consequences far beyond Genoa City. Jack, shaken by the encounter, rushes to Victor with the warning, and together they realize that the world they thought they understood, the world of corporate warfare, political influence, and complicated personal entanglements, now sits precariously atop a labyrinth of international power struggles, criminal networks, and shadow conspiracies that threaten to engulf everything they hold dear. And in the quiet, heavy moment after absorbing Orion's message, Jack and Victor exchange the same look they shared in the warehouse before all hell broke loose. A look devoid of rivalry, devoid of ego, filled only with the unwavering realization that they are now bound by something far more powerful than hatred or history, destiny, the destiny of defending their families against enemies they never knew existed. Enemies who do not fear the Newman name or the Abbott legacy, enemies who see Genoa City not as a battleground but as a resource to exploit, a territory to conquer, a kingdom ripe for takeover. And so begins the next chapter in the unlikely saga of Victor and Jack's reconciliation, not born of peace, but forged in fire, blood, and the unbreakable truth that the only way to survive the darkness rising on the horizon is to stand united, two titans forced to rewrite the rules of their decades-long war, and embrace an alliance no one in Genoa City ever thought possible, not even themselves.